Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's conversation, Nat Hab Author Series, The Spirit of the Rainforest, is brought to you by Ph.D. scientist, Nat Geo explorer, and author Dr. Rosa Espinoza. Thank you so much for being here today, Rosa.
Thank you so much for having me, Brooke. It's so nice to see you again.
Yes, we've become quite close friends in the past few years. Well, not few years, few months. And I am so excited to bring you and your amazing knowledge to everybody here at NatHab. So before we begin, let's go back in time. And you have a very unique childhood that I loved reading all about in your book, The Spirit of the Rainforest. So tell us what that was like. You navigated between the Amazon rainforest, the high Andes, modern cities, and how did that shape who you are today?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I was born and raised in Peru, in South America, which is the second country to have the largest amount of Amazon rainforest apart from Brazil. And I was born and raised in the capital city, which is Lima, like any busy city from New York to London. Tall buildings, gray sky because of the pollution, just um, cars honking. My family, though, one generation prior, were still living in rural areas in the Andean mountains, but we also derive from the Amazon rainforest. We actually have been able to track back our heritage to a semi-nomad community in the central Amazon. And by virtue of that, we had families still to this day living in these rural areas. So anytime I was off school, my family would send me to visit my cousins, uncles, aunts. And so one summer I could be either harvesting potatoes in the soil, just playing with my cousins in the high Andean mountains, and others I would be just playing in the Amazon River, going around small wooden boats, getting fruits straight from the forest, playing with monkeys, not aware of how unique that upbringing was. Most of the classmates I had in Lima were either from families that have been for generations in the capital city. Many had never even visited places like the Amazon or European descent. And so this idea that I had such a deep indigenous upbringing was something I was not even aware of until a lot later in my life. And my grandmother, who's still alive today, she is an Andean healer and learned from a lot of the elderly back in her community and her ancestry that comes from the Amazon. And so I grew up with her, spending all my time. My parents were working. She would take care of me after school. And she spent a lot of time in the small garden that we had, just a very tiny space where she created a sort of natural pharmacy. She missed all her plants. That's what she grew up with. She has literal memories from when she was 5, and her main companions were small animals, sheep, dogs, and medicinal plants. And so she made sure to nurture Andean, Amazonian, and trees and shrubs and flowers. And me learning how she saw nature by seeing her interact with this. She had a very unique perspective that nature is living, and so she would talk to the flowers before harvesting them to make medicinal cocktails. And I think that was my first introduction to chemistry without the scientific terminology. And it just kind of took me to this path of being in love with science. Nobody in my family was a scientist before, and I just kind of became obsessed to this date.
So then, was there a particular moment that you realized you had such a unique upbringing?
I think it was when I moved to the US. So when I was 18, I had obtained a full scholarship to pursue a career in molecular biology. And then shortly after, I added a second degree in chemistry. And I was doing my normal degree, just, busy classes and exams. And as we were diving deep into research and learning about laboratory techniques, I just kind of kept coming back to the idea of, oh, but we have all of these medicinal plants in Peru, and plants are alive. And of course, that is such a removed concept from westernized knowledge systems like biology and biochemistry. And I just kind of kept navigating back to traditional medicine and realized nobody else in my classroom was interested necessarily in bringing back this ancestral wisdom or even kind of going back, because I think we have the tendency to just focus on what we have now and the technology, and even forgetting what we have already, known for a long time. And I think it was by noticing those natural inclinations that I started to kind of wonder, why is that? And by getting to talk with more people, realized that, yeah, not everybody just happens to grow up spending part of their childhood across mountains and rainforests like the Amazon. And I think over time, I just kind of like learned, there is a term we call this indigenous knowledge, and even kind of a remembering, honestly. I had an experience too, my last year in undergrad, that I went to do an internship in China in a traditional Chinese medicine hospital that also had a very strong program from Western medicine. And it was actually one of the leading hospitals in Beijing. It was considered the official hospital for the Olympic Games back in 2008. And they had these
Wow.
two strong foods for traditional medicine and Western medicine, to the point that a patient would get typically two recipes, one for traditional medicine and one for your Western pills. And I think seeing something that I had kind of lived, but very informally, put into such a systemized, recognized, and valued way and respected way really made me realize, holy, we have this in Peru. I grew up with this, but we've ignored it so much. Why? And well, to me, my answer is, well, we just don't have science about it. And the few science articles that we have are not necessarily led by us Peruvians.
Yes, and you have made some fantastic scientific revelations, and you talk a lot about them in your book. But before we get into what a lot of those are specifically, could you talk about this transition? So, what did you end up studying for your PhD? And what were some of
Mhm.
the main things that you took away that then led to the really important topics that are in this book?
I That experience in China was really transformative for me because, of course, like any young person, I was like, what will I do with my life? I knew I love science, but I didn't even realize what that looked like. I was really intentional. I didn't want to just jump into a job. I wanted to see what I could make best use of the skills I was learning. And that experience, seeing how when you do have enough science backing up your traditional ancestral knowledge, and in this case, China has had a lot of written history of their traditional knowledge, unlike Peru that we don't. Then they have been able to elevate it to the point that their traditional practices for medicine are even included within insurance health systems. And I thought that that was mind blowing because people would laugh at an idea like that in Peru. And I took a year after that to work and just kind of really assess what is it that I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go back and try to find a way to do that, to merge these two knowledge systems to find better solutions. I didn't know if I wanted to do that by doing a PhD or opening an organization or find a business that would help me do that. I had no clues. And eventually I said, well, you know what? I want to learn as much as I can about the science so then I can hopefully one day lead it. And that led me to a PhD in chemical biology at the University of Michigan. If anybody's connected, go blue. Um, and I went in a very in-depth, of course, trajectory of laboratory there. Um, Got to fall in love with microbes and the role in medicine as well. I did a postdoctorate there. And during that whole transition, I think I also had a lot of experiences that let me see the gaps as to what needed to be solved. So then the work that I was envisioning could happen in a respectful and ethical way so that we can actually have progress without eradicating people's roots and without necessarily perpetuating some of the ways that science has been conducted. Because I think we know better now, and I think we can do better. And I think a lot of our youth is aiming for that.
Yeah, and you include so many examples in your book. And for those who haven't read it yet, which hopefully you will after this conversation, so every single chapter actually starts with a traditional plant, and
Yeah.
then this traditional uses, and then it's like scientific information, what's been known about it. Could so to take this like idea from theory to actually practice, do you want to go through an example that you went through in the book of one of these, and then
Yeah,
so that we can better understand this concept?
absolutely. And I think I will also go ahead and mention when I was in this process of PhD and postdoc and trying to figure out what is it, how do I make this vision come to life? Of course, I went into a lot of reading about the Amazon rainforest. And like I said, we don't really have many written records, which is why even anthropologically, it puts the Amazon as this black hole in knowledge of our history. Now, of course, with technology, and we can dive into incredible things we're learning about it because we definitely had ancestral civilizations and so much rich technology that we have just kind of lost in time because we don't have written records. So I went into reading the ones that we did, which are primarily from early European explorers that came in into the 1500s, 1600s, and so forth. Of course, nowadays we have a lot more literature written by locals, but in that whole process, I learned, of course, I love exploration. I'm a National Geographic explorer. I lead through adventure too, with a base in science. And was not finding a book that was driving through adventure and science led by a female PhD person that is from these areas. And so I think that it was became part of the motivation as to, well, let's just, add to that. I love writing, and then let's just see and try to expand the literature that we have available also, because I was noticing that the books or content, storytelling content that it's out there, it tends to be very focused on the larger predators and the very exotic and this kind of like rough and ready wilderness, which of course, we have to acknowledge it, and I do too in my book, but there is this whole other plethora of just as fascinating, important, intriguing, all, wondering kind of creatures and spaces that were just not being highlighted anywhere. And I think it's just by virtue that people, don't come across them. And we have through our, over decade experience exploring. So, for example, I'll mention one here for my chapter 2, where I talk about several expeditions that we did to an area that blows everyone's mind. So a lot of people didn't think it even existed. It is a river that boils that lives in the central Peruvian Amazon. And we can dive farther, but it's the largest thermal river documented in the planet. And when I say boiling, I mean literally boiling. The water is bubbling. It is scorching hot. It reaches 99 Celsius. So you put an egg in there and it will cook. You put a chicken and it will cook. Of course, if you accidentally step into it, it is very bad. And we had an accident happen to one of the team members, and it kind of led to this insane story of teamwork and resilience. But I connect every chapter to a local native species that a lot of people wouldn't have heard of. And in this case, for example, because since the theme was kind of water, I don't know if it will show quite well in the photo, but I connected to this vine that is called Yacuhuasca, which in Quechua, in native languages, means the vine of water. And I kind of make a drawing we've come across many times in the Amazon. And it's actually one of the more like secret ways that locals get to access clean water when they're in the middle of nowhere without any access to rivers. Our vines, these are vines that harbor a lot of rainwater and also from the soil. And so they are not too thick. The moment you open it, it's almost as if you open the faucets, and then you just have clean water come out. It tastes clean and just pure. And it can really be life saving to know this when you're in the middle of nowhere. We have had that happen. And, by virtue of working with incredible Indigenous colleagues, they know how to identify it. And you want to know how to identify it because there's one that is very similar, that it's slightly toxic. It won't kill you, but it will give you very bad diarrhea. And of course, that's not a game you want to play in those scenarios in the middle of nowhere. But it's kind of stories like that. And I talk about the traditional knowledge behind it, but also the scientific information, if any, that is available currently.
Yeah, I love that. I learned so much from reading your book about both aspects, like what is this used traditionally for? And then also, why is it so important for today's science or medicinal practices or anything like that? So I definitely love that aspect of your book. And you also explored some very exciting discoveries that you have made throughout your career. And The first little critter that I want to talk about, people might not know about, and that's stingless bees. I didn't know much about them before reading your book and interviewing you now several times and becoming your friend. But now I'm completely in love with these little things. Could you talk a little bit more about them? What are stingless bees and why are they so critical to the rainforest?
I'm so glad you say you're in love with stingless bees now. I think that happens the moment you just learn about it. So I would ask everyone right now, and if you have access to the chat, to let us know if you had heard about those before or not. Most of the world hasn't. I get to speak to audiences of, thousands of people globally, and I have had many instances where I'm in a theater and it's 1,000 people in the audience, and just maybe one person raises their hand when I ask, have you heard about stingless bees? So I like to ask the question because it really shows you. It's just somehow the oldest bee on our planet. It's actually so old that it dates back to the times of the dinosaurs. So we're talking 80 million years ago. That's still alive today. Think about that resilience across time and generations. We just haven't heard about it. We don't have an emoji for it. Doesn't really appear in books or films. There are many theories that I have as to why that is the case, but they are the native bees of our tropics. To this day, if you follow our tropics, our equator line, you will find stingless bees, about 500 to 600 unique species. What is curious is some look like the bees that we're used to seeing, the yellow and black and striped bees, the honeybees, the one that are stinging, that we eat the honey from typically. And some stingless bees look similar to that, but some look so different that you perhaps wouldn't believe me that they are bees the first time you see them. And that even happened to me the first time I saw some of these very different species. I thought they were ants. They were so tiny, they were the size of a grain of rice, and their entire bodies were black. I have seen some others that the wings seem to have this kind of like purple shimmer color, and the bodies may be entirely metallic green. Just such a wide variety. I'm surprised there's not a Disney film about them yet. They are indeed stingless, so they cannot sting you, which definitely triggers two questions. Ooh, so I'll be okay. I can be safe without any protective equipment, and then other people, ooh, but how do they defend themselves? And yeah, nature is wise. So stingless bees don't sting, but they bite, and they also use medicinal resins from trees that have natural antibacterials to make their homes with that. So that acts like this natural fortress. And they also know how to pull hair really badly. And for the first time, I've been working with them for the last 5 to 6 years. Just a few weeks ago, in my last trip to the jungle, I had one decide to go up my nostril and pull a hair. Also, mind you, I was with CNN recording at the time. And so I was trying to
Wow.
not sneeze or make a fuss, but my eyes just started crying. And we just had to stop the whole thing. I had to clean up myself, and it was just really funny. But yeah, they're spectacular. In terms of the Amazon, there are even records when we go back to these early European explorers from the 14, 1500s, where they do describe amongst the incredible jaguars and anacondas, they describe these bees that were so angelical that people lived with them. And even to this day, in many communities, people still live with these bees. Physically, the bees like to nest in wood, so you walk into some people's homes and you will find them in the ceiling or in the walls. The family I have heard of that has the most bees has about 20 hives in their living room. Imagine living with a constant buzzing. And we've done such amazing work around them, from storytelling campaigns that got, millions and millions of views with National Geographic to raise awareness, to even inspire a new law in Peru, to recognize them as our native species. And most recently, and this is some news, Brooke, it just got approved last week. We're waiting for the formal resolution to really put it out there. But a local municipality in the central Peruvian Amazon, for the first time, has recognized the rights of these bees to exist, thrive, and regenerate, the rights of nature movements, which actually marks the first time that an insect gets its rights recognized globally. So we cannot wait to put that more out there, because if an insect can get the rights recognized, I really think it can propel a lot more of this change.
Oh my gosh, that's big news since the last time we talked. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. Um, so I want to weave together both your chemical biology background and why in the world you have stingless bees, because you're not an entomologist. You just like gave us your great background,
Correct.
and people are probably like, stingless bees, chemical biology, traditional plants, I don't understand. So could you actually talk a little bit more about this? How did stingless bees get into
Yes.
your life, and then why? Because there's a very important why here.
I like to explain, I look at nature through a medicinal lens because that is really what my expertise comes. It's looking at the chemistry of our biological world. And I focus it on medicinal perspectives because that's what I grew up with my grandmother and what fascinates me. And that has really led us to some incredible projects from Boiling River and its microbes, which you would think, how is that related to medicine? Well, microbes make medicines, a lot of the ones that we use today in pharmacies, two other projects on animal self-medicating that we can talk about later. But stingless bees particularly, yes, you're right. I'm not an entomologist. I was even surprised to learn that some of these were bees. We do collaborate with the leading entomologists in this topic in South America, but they reached out at first to me around when COVID, the pandemic had started, because they had noticed that many communities, and my colleague is from one of these communities, were consuming stingless bee honey as one of the main ingredients to treat the symptoms of of this virus. And through that process, we learned that communities were using stingless bee honey for many other things, very different type of conditions like infertility, eye cataracts, inflammation, wounds, burns. I mean, such a wide range. And they came to me saying, we want to know if this is true. Can we do some science here to add the value? Because the communities wanted to basically revalorize this honey and see if it could become a new source of sustainable income. And back at that time, a bottle of honey would sell for maybe $3 American, not really generating sustainable income. And so we embarked in what became the first chemical analysis of this honey in Peru. And, you know, we ended up seeing hundreds of biological molecules that were known to have the properties that were similar to what traditional medicine was already saying. So validating a lot of the knowledge that communities knew. And by having that data, then the communities could now really help bring the value up. Now the price for that honey has boosted over 500%. So now one of those bottles costs 20 to 30 American dollars. Suddenly becomes interesting. And something typically that people ask me at this point is, well, then how do you ensure that it's not over harvested, right? We're not exploiting the species. Something I haven't mentioned yet is the traditional bee that we're all used to seeing, the honey stinging bee, travels 1 to 2 kilometers. If it doesn't have flowers around, it will be fine. It will survive. The stingless bees cannot do that. Most of them will travel 20 meters, maybe 100 meters, maybe 200 meters. So if they don't have flowers and a thriving rainforest right next to it, it just won't make it. And so by virtue of growing and raising stingless bees, people have to protect and are regenerating the Amazon rainforest, quite literally, to drive that sustainable economy. So it's become a really beautiful project. But that is, yeah, that's how I came to bees, through this medicinal lens. That's how I get to any of the new projects that we have, really.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and the exact connection too. It's like, how exactly did bees get into your life? Yes, coming from that direction. Very interesting. And now there's another discovery that you talked about a lot in your book that would be very interesting to go into a little bit deeper, and that is how you discovered that animals self-medicate. So, what is the story there? What does like self-medication mean? And what does it reveal about animal intelligence and the pharmacy of the rainforest?
Yeah, so that topic of how animals are medicated in the wild, it's known as zoopharmacognosy. It's been going on for a while. It's a relatively, I'm going to still call it a recent area of science because we still don't know much about it, as I know we will in the next few years. It's starting to gain momentum and it's appearing on different articles in the BBC. There's been at least 3 mentions of that this year. And at this point, I will ask people if they have ever seen their dog or their cat eating grass. My dog does it. He knows exactly where to go and what specific grass he wants to eat to perch himself. So in a way, they know somehow, we'll get to that, what grass to consume to help with their digestion. That is already a concept of medication. And that idea translates into the wilds. And scientists have seen this, measure this in very quantifiable ways, all the way from elephants to chimps to even your smaller insects. We even have theories for the bees doing this as well. Some animals do it as prevention, the same way we may consume vitamins. Some do it to treat an active injury. Some do it to boost their health after they've been sick. And what is even more fascinating is recent research shows that they teach one another as well. For example, there was a case of chimps in Africa that they saw one of the mama chimps teaching the others how to use this specific leaf to treat injuries in the skin. So showing that it's not just this very raw, unfiltered knowledge that they have and go, but that they are processing it enough to know that they can share to one another. So it's not just a knowledge we acquire and it just gets transmitted through our genetics. It's also like a social knowledge between animals, which is, I think, spectacular when we stop to think about it. Some of the examples being elephants consuming tree bark to induce labor, and women in the similar community making tree tea from the tree bark to induce labor. Um, or chimps knowing what leaves to consume to get rid of parasites, and quite literally getting rid of those parasites rather quickly when they consume those leaves, and people from that community consuming other parts of the same plants to treat infections as well and parasites. I think what that really makes me think of is just it makes me actually rethink our whole idea on how do animals communicate with the natural world, because there's a lot there that we just don't understand. 10 years ago, if I would have told you trees talk by fungal networks under the soil, people would have laughed. Of course, now we know that is absolutely solid data, and it's guiding restoration projects. It is a communication style that we just had no knowledge of. I think that there is a communication style that we still haven't uncovered between animals and the plants, whether the plants are releasing these chemicals and the animals have these other senses and can naturally or evolutionarily detect where to go for specific purposes. I think it also opens the question as to how we humans acquire medicinal knowledge. And that I connect back a little bit to my ancestry, but the work that we do too. We typically think of an elder teaches the younger person becomes the healer, like what happened to my grandmother. In other cases, some, for example, ayahuasquero, shamans that use ayahuasca, this medicinal plant in the Amazon, say that they acquire that knowledge, that they literally see it appear to them in dreams as to, I need to use this one plant for this one purpose. So that is their method of acquiring knowledge. A third one that I think has just not been explored is by observing animals, which clearly now there are examples that indicate that. And I think we can even think that this didn't even started necessarily with our own human species, Homo sapiens. I think this would have started even before. And the reason why is because there's this really cool scientific article that talks about how Neanderthals were found to have residues of aspirin from the plant that contains the active component of aspirin, salicylic acid. And those teeth that had those remains of aspirin also had high amounts of a bacterial infection. What does that mean? When a tooth hurt, they knew what plant to chew to help relieve the pain. How did they know that? If we go around and chew every single plant, the chances of people dying, I think, is quite high. So either they did that, which could have been, or could they have been observing animals and helping at least narrow down what plants to test from that? And I think that is what my bets would be on. And yeah, ever since we're starting a study of its first kind, like this one in the Amazon with a colleague, Elodie Freeman, and Indigenous Ashaninka people as well.
Oh, could you go a little bit more into that? That was actually my next question. Like, where does that's an amazing background knowledge. So where is the research now? What are the research questions that you're asking and hoping to find some sort of answer for?
So when I first got to this idea, or just even learn about this area of science, was through an ayahuasca experience that was very out there, and it at least led me to want to start this work. But of course, I am not an expert on the topic. I will talk about the chemistry of the plants, but I don't know how to even begin that. So I eventually got connected with one of the leading scientists in this field. And after a while of being able to get the funding, we came to the field this July to start with the first assessment of the area. Where do you even begin? We have stories from our work in the Amazon of monkeys rubbing against certain trees, of jaguars even having consuming ayahuasca the same way that cats consume catnip. We have a few different loose stories, but of course no documentation. And so now we basically needed to have a first assessment, know where the animals are hanging out, see if we can monitor their behaviors, if we can start connecting the plants that they could be using, and really do a whole assessment before we can even narrow it down what plant or what animal we're going to be focusing on. We do have some preliminary data, but I am not allowed to share just yet. But I'm hoping that next year we can put the first work like this out there, which I think is going to be mind blowing. And what I'm even more excited about, of course, the fact of understanding where knowledge comes from, I find it fascinating. But I think the idea that when we talk about restoration and reforestation of native plants in the Amazon, we tend to think about the ecological benefits, of course, maybe benefits to people because they can eat it, consume it for medicine, but we don't really talk about the animal health benefits. And I think by having that mapped out, we can just really boost how we do restoration.
Yeah. Wow, I hadn't thought about that before because there's so many areas that, you and I talked about extensively, and me with other just scientists and biologists around the world, at how important restoration is, but where do you even begin? And if there's
Mhm.
critical species of plants that have to be planted and we don't know what those are, then what? If animals need this critical species, but we don't know to plant it, then are they going to have the resources they need? That's a really good question.
That's exactly right. I mean, people are talking, let's protect endangered animals. Yes, absolutely, we need to do that, but we also need to think about how to regenerate them. Just bringing them into a space to help with their health temporarily and then release them back. I don't think that it will necessarily always be the solution by virtue of how our planet is. The jungle is not regenerated as quickly as it used to, and there's a lot of invasive species out there. So if we kind of have mapped out where the animals are and we know what are the plants that are good for their health as well, besides the nutrition, I think we could really think about a whole new way of restoring the Amazon with this triple benefit of animal health. But yeah, it's just quite exciting to think, the how much we could boost animal population by doing that. We haven't even measured the impact on their fertility as well, which is an issue with some animals right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a really interesting question too. Oh my gosh. This is why I love talking to
You see,
scientists. Like,
there's
how
so
many
many
questions are you
questions that come
asking
up.
me? I love it. I love it. I love it. And towards the end of your book, you posed or you shared a story of a very interesting um, like expedition you went on that included the nighttime. And what was this
Mm.
particular expedition that you went on? What were you studying? And what were those really important questions that you were hoping to answer with this really interesting night expedition you did?
Thank you for bringing that up. I always forget to share some of my most favorite stories. And at this point, I will also clarify we're a team. I don't do this alone. And the whole point is how can we encourage more youth to do this work and just kind of open that possibility, even for people who may not have the privilege to access scientific education. And so we've been training a lot of Indigenous youth and community members who are now taking on the lead to lead in some of these projects. So one of those was, and I'll start with just a very short background story. When we talk about the Amazon, people tend to think about just one big jungle, green, long rivers, periods. But in reality, we have so many ecosystems within that are actually very different to one another. From your low altitude Amazon, where you're going to be covering mosquitoes most likely, to your high altitude Amazon, where I don't even wear mosquito repellent because it gets a lot cooler, and you get cool animals from the Andes, like the Andean bear and pumas, which you would never even think of about running into the Amazon. A third ecosystem that is also very poorly known globally are called white sand forests. And these are patches of lands. They're quite small, maybe 1 to 2 hectares, where you are still in the rainforest. So you look around, it looks just as a typical tropical rainforest, but below your feet is a different story. Instead of your grounds and litter and leaves, you have white sand as if you're walking in a Caribbean ocean. It feels very bizarre. And I'm not just talking a little bit of sand, I'm saying your feet will sink into that sand. How that comes to be, the strongest evidence is that the winds take basically those particles all the way from the Saharan deserts and then eventually got deposited in the Amazon by virtue of how the winds work in the Andes. A long evolution for that to develop. That white sand makes those soils extremely poor compared to the rest of the Amazon, which puts another set of pressures, and you end up with flowers and wildlife that you do not find absolutely anywhere else in the Amazon rainforest. I have had friends that with just a few expeditions have found completely new mammals, new butterflies, new flowers. I mean, just mind blowing. So I really, really wanted to go to one at some point. And we were playing with some of our team members about looking for wildlife that glows, the ability to biofluorescence. People may typically have seen this in the deep ocean where you have jellyfish that glow, or certain kind of fish, or even sharks. There's now even turtles from the oceans in California that have been shown to have this ability to glow because they're in the deep in the ocean, away from the light. They develop these mechanisms to glow. Why? To communicate, either to mate or to find food or to scare away predators. It's a new language. Some people call it the language of light. This concept has now started to be a bit more explored globally, but not really in the Amazon forests. And some of these white sand forests tend to be also covering heavy canopy. So you have areas where it's quite dark constantly. So kind of a parallelism to you don't have constant light. Anyways, we ended up kind of going to one of these areas quite deep into the jungle with our torch of UV to see if we could find anything that would shine back at us. Not really expecting anything. In the span of 3 hours, I saw the most amount of wildlife actually I have come across in the rainforest, from some of the most dangerous snakes to just incredible wildlife. But we also ran into two animals that were responding back by shining their bodies. They had this ability to glow, including a frog and a cricket. And then diving into the literature, we learned that none of these had been reported from the Peruvian Amazon. Of course, we beat ourselves to this day that we didn't document it further. We just went playing. We were just there to have fun and kind of see if we found anything. And now, of course, we do want to turn that into a project, but I think it just kind of led us to this idea. There is so much left to be seen, so much left to communicate. One on the sense of wonder, that is just extraordinary things to see in our natural worlds, to instill this sense of exploration that no, not everything's doomed and not everything's already seen and done. And three, of course, on the scientific side, a lot of the incredible medical imaging technologies that we have today for surgeries, MRI, etc., derive from glowing organisms. So I think the potential there, of course, is also quite huge. But yeah, I encourage people to dive into that topic. That's the entire concept of my chapter 12. I dove deep into how the concept of glowing really dates back centuries and across cultures, from auroras or glowing skies to algae, glowing oceans, and some really fascinating stories along that way.
Yeah, that's definitely a group of just species and animals and an ability that really hadn't gone on my radar either. And so there's this book that keeps popping up to me over and over and over again that I really want to read. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Light Eaters. Have you read of that book? Heard of
Mm-mm.
that book?
No, I'm gonna
Well,
write it
it's
down.
about, yeah, it's about it. Yeah, and so I think that's on my to-do list. I mean, I already have 3 books right now that I'm reading and 2 audiobooks, and I'm interviewing amazing authors. Like I will eventually get to Light Eaters. But now everybody, we have some show and tell. So Rosa sent me some photos that I want to share with you, and I'm just gonna let her explain what they are, so that you can see some of the work that we've talked about. So let's just get this on up here. All right. There you go.
So that photo, well, you guys have heard already about the bees, so it's not as shocking. This was taken in 2022, I think, or 2021. It was actually inspired on a photo shoot that Angelina Jolie did for National Geographic to support female beekeepers in Africa. She posed in white studio with stinging bees. So I don't think I was as brave as her because I don't think I would dare to pose with stinging bees. But we decided to recreate a similar idea, but with stingless bees and with the Amazon as the backdrop. I worked with an incredible photographer, Annalisa Sotelo, and it took us 4 hours to get this shot, actually. Of course, it doesn't, I appear very peaceful. My body was sore because I had to stand in such an awkward position to get just the right angle. And I had honey kind of in different parts of my face to attract the bees naturally. I was really lucky that none of them bit me until the end of that shoot. They were really calm for the 4 hours, but we also kind of did some prepping for it because this species that I'm posting with is a very important species culturally, medicinally. And but if they really want to bite you, if many of them come at the same time, I don't think I would have been able to hold her for more than just a few minutes. And so we followed the lead beekeeper. He said, I know my bees. And we actually saw them calm down so much the moment he was around at the beginning, which I think also kind of led us to read a bit about how bees, there's science now that shows that bees recognize people's faces and remember people's faces, which is extraordinary, and that they can also sense the pheromones. So they literally can identify the person that constantly visits them, which is just insane and, kind of backs up what we were seeing. And he just kind of encouraged me to get into a meditation style because if I was calm, the bees would be calm too. If I was stressed and nervous, the bees would be too. That is a lot of pressure when you're hearing a lot of buzzing and they are kind of flying really quickly that they're mechanically hitting you. So I had to tap into some sort of zen that apparently I have within me. I need to find it again to just do that. And then I think at some point the bees felt really calm. They were licking honey off my finger. They were just kind of standing still. One even stood on my eyelid long enough to get it on a photo shoot, which was insane. Yeah, so that was in that photo shoot ended up getting I think over 10 million views with National Geographic and really helped start this more global conversation about these forgotten species.
Yeah, that went viral. Such a good photo. It's just awesome. All right, next.
Oh, that's a beautiful photo of my friend Gustavo Carrasco, of this incredible jaguar. In the expedition, I was in July this year. We were in one of the deepest points I have ever been in the rainforest, and we actually one of our last days of the trip, we ended up finding um, jaguar footprints from a baby jaguar. It appeared to be a small one, 5 minutes away from our camp, and they look really fresh from like the day before. And of course, if there are baby jaguar footprints, you would have the mama around. We just didn't find the footprints, which was quite wild because we were there using camera traps to map the wildlife. We knew there were jaguars, but clearly they were a lot closer to us than we were aware of, and most likely they were watching us because we did some night walks. Yeah, the jaguar is such a, of course, fascinating creature for so many reasons. In the Amazon, it's revered as such a protective spirit. Some shamans summon upon the spirit of the jaguar for protectiveness when they're in ayahuasca sessions. I think I started to develop a much stronger relationship with this animal after an ayahuasca experience where I somehow dreamt that I became a jaguar, which was a surreal experience, something that apparently a lot of people seek to do because like the jaguar signifies so much strength and many things in the Amazon. But ever since, it just kind of keeps calling me back. Um, and hopefully part of this medication study with animals will lead us to some clues with the jaguar.
Hey, I completely understand. I have one on the back of my wall here. I love jaguars so much. That's Madrosa. She's in the Pantanal for anybody who's been there.
Oh.
Okay. Next.
Here I am crossing the Boiler River, one of the hottest spots. I mean, you can even see it there with the vapor. The vapor is scorching hot. It can make you dizzy. And of course, it fogs any lens. And my hair was wet, although you cannot see that in the photo. And there is no bridge, as you can see. Your bridge are those small rocks. And many of them are covered in algae, so they are very slippery. So of course you have to be triple aware of every single step. We were there to collect samples. We were there because nobody had looked at the only wildlife that can live in these extreme conditions because every small animal that falls in immediately gets cooked. But microbes can, extreme microbes. And so that was actually the first project I led um, as part of my PhD in the Amazon rainforest. It was my first time kind of coming back with this scientific hat on to lead work. And yeah, it was fascinating. It led us to discover new microbial species. And there was, like I said, a very surreal experience that with one of our team members getting injured in another part of the Boiling River and us getting out of the jungle in the middle of the night, basically, with very little equipment, with somebody that was severely injured, and us thinking, oh, we are coming out, okay, we're getting close, we have a nurse at camp, you'll be fine. And then right when our hopes are getting so excited, so high by coming out of the forest, we realized we still had to cross this section. We have forgotten. And what happens is when it's dark, all you see is vapor. It feels as if you're in a very horrid dream. Anyways, I end up telling the full story, and everything was fine. My team member recovered. He actually has gone back to the rainforest and the Boiling River many times since.
Mhm. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, that chapter was intense. Like, things can go wrong on these expeditions, even when you're super, super careful. And so I'm really glad you included that example. Like, what can go wrong? Luckily, he made it, thank goodness. But yeah, ooh, talking about a lot of
Agreed.
teamwork for this one. And everyone, I just want to remind you, we only have a few more photos. So if you have questions, please submit them in the questions field. That way that
Mhm.
I can ask them to Rosa here in a little bit. But we're not done yet. So next picture.
This one we took, my colleague Luis Garcia took, it was a few years ago. It was actually the first time I was in that white sand forest that I was mentioning, where we saw this caterpillar within 20 minutes in our walk. I haven't seen one since, not this size. You cannot appreciate the size that much, but it's longer than my hand, um,
Whoa.
and thicker than, well, as thick as my fist. So it's big.
As
And
thick
yeah, I
as your
know.
fist? What?
Yes, it is quite thick. And it got the Guinness World Record for the most poisonous caterpillar in the world. Each little spike that you see there, those turquoise-like needles, contains enough toxins to make you bleed from the eyes within 2 hours. It causes this deep internal hemorrhage that is just basically makes your entire body decompose so quickly by bleeding. There is an antidote, but of course, when
Thank
we run
God.
into this caterpillar, it was just fascinating. And yeah, we ended up taking these incredible shots. And just recently, so just a few months ago, I learned that there is one community in the Amazon that eats them as a delicacy. And how can we not study that? I mean, that has to become something at some point when we have the capacity. But yeah, they do. It's a very sought after delicacy when the animal is in high abundance. And also for those wondering, it turns into a very, very boring moth that is just brown.
Oh,
So it just has all the exotic colors at this stage.
how do they get their toxins? Do they get them like the monarch butterfly we hear, they get them from milkweeds? Is it something similar, or are they born with these toxins?
To be honest, they have not really been studied that much. I would presume it's possibly a combination of consuming toxic plants. They could be consuming toxic insects as well. Like that's how some poisonous
Hmm.
frogs become poisonous. I would imagine that it's more like that rather than they just inherently being like that, but maybe they are. We just don't know.
That's nuts. The size of my hand? Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Ah, amazing. All right.
Pink dolphins. That's also photo by my friend Luis Garcia. A lot of people have never heard that we have pink dolphins on our planet. You find them in some places in Asia, I believe, but definitely in the Amazon rainforest. And they like to travel in families. They're fascinating. They are not born pink, but they become pink over time because of the Amazonian waters. And there's a lot of mysticism around them. Some cultures think of that they used to be men that lived underwater. Some cultures have just different stories of creation, but they, I think, add so much sense of wonder seeing these like flashes of pink jump in and out of the Amazon rivers.
And our mutual friend is an expert, Fernando Trujillo, who's also a Nat Geo explorer.
Yes,
So everybody, please look up Fernando if you want to learn more. I interviewed him
yes.
on my show. He's amazing. But yeah, definitely look him up if you would like to learn more about this phenomenal species. I would love to see some. All right, I think that is the last photo. It is. So I will stop sharing my screen, and then everyone, please send in your questions because I'm going to switch over to you all because I know Rosa really well and I can talk to her for the rest of the day, but I'm sure that you all have questions too. Um, oh, someone just ordered your book. Oh, I'm thanking you for your
Thank you.
time. Great. It's a really great book. You're going to enjoy it. I read it thoroughly. Great. Oh, who's the expert? His name is Fernando Trujillo. So Juillo. He's wonderful. He's very charismatic. I think he just had a film made on him. Am I wrong? I'm pretty
I
sure.
hope so because their work is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's based in Colombia. He's phenomenal. Okay, great. So everybody, let's go some questions here. Oh, is it possible to get the stingless bee honey in the US or is it only Peruvian based?
Not yet. We are doing our best to work to get all the paperwork needed so that people can get it anywhere. Because it will really help support the communities, and we're working on mechanisms so the communities sell it directly without an intermediary, which would also be our ideal goal. And so, hopefully, within the next year or so, that will be a reality.
Right. Ooh, this is a really good follow-up question to make sure that wildlife is protected and exploitation doesn't happen. But as the info, like your research and just a lot of this really important information gets out there, how will Peru and the surrounding countries make sure to protect the communities and plants and animals that these discoveries are being made about?
That's a great question. And there are already standing frameworks and systems that are meant to be protecting, like the Nagoya Protocol and others, being fully transparent in places like Peru and South America. I think we need more because I have seen the gaps. And it is because of that that from the very start, we partner with ecological and environmental lawyers to find ways and mechanisms that the science and cultural data can be turned into policy. And so we've been doing that very softly and quietly over the last few years. That looks like specifically in two ways. We are developing something known as a biocultural protocol. There was a term developed by the United Nations a while ago, which acts as a legal tool that is developed to, with, and by communities, translating their needs, their desires into legal language. And then it gets formalized with municipalities or local entities so that they can protect their rights. And we have seen already positive cases where communities were able, for example, in Mexico, be able to make sure that some of the resources like agave wouldn't just be sold and exploited at prices that they were not being benefited equally with. Against some like giant tequila companies, for example, and it ended up working out really well for those communities. So we wanted to take a similar approach and build that for stingless bees, which is why we've also been a bit slower on any kind of potential commercialization until those things were in place. And part of that is also with the rights of nature framework, given the rights to stingless bees so that there would be a more direct way for them to get benefited and the communities that keep them alive and safe. And we only just got this first case of a local law passed recognizing these rights, which will come hand in hand with this biocultural protocol. And so, yeah, we're now excited to kind of keep scaling on that and building upon that. And at least my vision is that that is a framework on how any other work happens. the medication work and the other things I've mentioned is quite really early on, but the components will basically remain and get translated, and hopefully others can follow too.
Oh, that's so fantastic that I mean, of course you already had it worked out. There was protections in place as you're making the discoveries. That's great. 'Cause the last thing we want to hear is like exploitation, unfortunately, as a byproduct, and not as the hope or going into it. So that's fantastic to hear. Oh, I love when people ask questions to connect ecosystems. So the boiling river, is it similar to the hot springs in Yellowstone? And what
Great
makes that river
question.
boil?
Great question. Yes and no. No, in the sense that Yellowstone is connected to an active volcano. That's what makes it boil. And it also has very acidic conditions or very alkaline conditions, depending on where you are. I've been in Yellowstone multiple times because we did a few different educational activities with children there. And I love it because every year you go, you see something different, and the system is still changing, right? Those geothermal systems are actively shifting. In Peru, the boiling river is not connected to a volcano. So that is the first major difference. There are theories as to how it boils, the strongest one, and I would recommend people look up the work of Andres Russo. He has an incredible TED talk about it. How basically the water gets heated up at the core of the earth, and by natural cracks that happen on an earth's surface, the water can travel through and eventually seeps out, making this boiling river that has constant volume and heat. And the similarities is that we have found some extreme microbes that have adapted to both, which is quite interesting. And I think that just speaks to the power of microbes of being able to turn on and off their genes the way that we turn switches in our home to adapt wherever they are.
Oh, how cool. Yeah, I was just in Yellowstone on a film shoot and I finally got to see like the Grand Prismatic. Hopefully, I'm sure you've seen that one. Just, I
It's
mean, how is that real?
gorgeous.
And microbes made that?
I know. I There's a fun if anybody ever gets to do this. There are some materials out there available for free where you can basically get like a color code, so then and know what microbes are related to what colors. So if you see orange color, you know that specific kind of cyanobacteria that makes a compound called carotenoid, which is basically what makes your carrots orange, and also do happen to make this orangey color as a way to almost like a sunscreen. They're protecting themselves against the sun by that.
Oh my gosh. I have to look this up now and like every single color of
Yeah.
Grand Prismatic because I'm editing photos right now to post about them because I
Yes,
was like,
do that.
finally, I got to see this
Yeah.
famous one. Well, somehow this hour is almost already up, Rosa. Which again, like I said, I could talk to you for all day because you are amazing.
Me too.
But with that, I would love to turn it back to you for any last closing comments.
No, thank you so much. You're always amazing to talk to. I feel like we will always dive into new topics and new things. So let me know what you think about the Yellowstone. I'm glad everyone's looking and following. This is my book, The Spirit of the Rainforest, How Indigenous Wisdom and Scientific Curiosity Reconnects Us to the Natural World. It's available digitally and in audio. I recorded the voice myself. And so, yeah, let me know if you do read it and comment online. If you want to hear more about our work, you can follow my socials, Rosa V. Espinoza. Our organization is amazonresearch.org. Any type of contribution helps us do this work. All goes for the activities. If anybody wants to reach out as well, just please do. And yeah, I hope to see you again and hopefully to have you join us in the field, Brooke.
Life goals, fingers crossed. I am determined to get to the Amazon with you because I think we would have a blast.
Yes,
So
I
we would.
know.
Well, everyone, I'm so excited that you all got to meet Rosa, who I am so happy to now call her a friend. We are going to continue this author series, and I would love to show you what the new book is. So, drum roll. Brand new book. This is called Rome. It was just published. Rome: Wild Animals and the Race to Repair Our Fractured World. So, this book is next. That interview will be in December. So, please keep your eye out on that. Look up this book. I will also have all of these links to Rosa, to her book, to this new book, in the follow up email that all of you are going to get. So, just want to let you know in case you wanted to get ahead on our author series. But again, Rosa, thank you so much. And I would like to thank everybody who tuned in. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with Nat Hab, give us a call at 800-543-8255. 8917 and send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are more than happy to help you. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.